This show is part of the RetroZap.com podcast network.
And welcome everybody to a special episode of the Animanicast.
State your name.
Skippy Squirrel.
Occupation.
I'm a squirrel.
Ooh, riveting questioning, don't you think?
And welcome once again to the Animanicast. We are the only podcast out there that's dedicated to the animated television series, Animaniacs. And today we have a very special episode. We have an interview and discussion with the man, the myth, the writer, John P. McCann. I am Joey, and joining me once again is my brother Nathan.
Taboo!
And across the country in Georgia, it's Kelly.
Hi there.
And our special guest here with us as well. Ladies and gentlemen, you know him from Animaniacs, from Freakazoid, and of course, from his numerous other writings on television, and now, books as well. It's Mr. John P. McCann. John, welcome!
Hello!
Thank you so much for being on the show. It's quite an honor. You are the writer of many of our favorite episodes of Animaniacs, and we can't wait to discuss them with you. Thanks so much for being on.
Oh, great to be here.
All right. Well, today we're going to talk with John about his work on Animaniacs, how he got involved in the show, then also getting into a little bit of Freakazoid talk, and then moving on to, just pretty much everything else that we can talk to before John hangs up on us. So I think we better get right into it. John, how in the world did you first get started working on the show Animaniacs?
Glad to tell you. My answers seem a little clipped. It's because I have a note in front of me. It says, no uhs, you knows. Trying to avoid that.
Well, we don't follow that rule. But
I do.
I try.
Like, all the time.
I don't know.
Speak for yourself, Joey.
Well, I might feel better. But I was working as an editor at a magazine, and at night I was doing improv comedy with the Acme Comedy Theater Group, which was founded and directed by Sherry Stoner's husband. And I'd known Sherry and her husband, Mark Sweeney, for years. We met in another improv group. So they got me on board on Tiny Toons. There was going to be a spin-off of Elmira that Sherry was going to produce. And they brought in Peter Hastings, myself, Deanna Oliver, and then Nick Hollander was already on staff, and they had him in. He was going to be one of the writers working on that. So it ended up never happening, but they kept me in mind. And when Animaniacs was ready to go, they gave me a script, an idea for one called about Dracula. And so they just wanted to see how we'd do. And Paul Rugg at the time I think he got Beethoven. So we went off, wrote those, and we figured, well, look, there's Christmas money for a couple of broke guys. We were having a good time, and then they called up and said, why don't you come on in? We'd like to talk to you about being staff writers. So we tried to be cool, and then we hung up, and we giggled like girls, and then eventually that was it. We ended up working there.
John, I had a question about that initial Tiny Toons entrance. Was that the Take Elmira Please episode of Tiny Toon Adventures?
Yes, that's what it eventually became.
Ah, okay. Because I remember that as one of my favorite episodes of Tiny Toons. Surprised that didn't end up becoming its own series. Of course, it did later become sort of. I mean, there was a Pinky Elmira and the Brain show, so it kind of came to be in a sort of way, didn't it?
Yeah, it eventually got its moment. I guess that Elmira had been in an episode with Montana Max, and however they measured these things, it had she had scored very well. Kids really had liked the character then, so they thought they'd run with that and make it more of a see what her own show would look like.
Yeah. Well, we certainly loved her. I mean, she was on the Animaniacs even a few times as well. So, yeah, she was definitely a popular character from my childhood. I remember it reminded me of our sister quite a bit, actually. But that's another story.
Welcome to the Elmira Fun Show. I'm Elmira, and this is fun. Elmira!
One more question, I guess, about that Take Elmira, Please. I'm not quite sure, but was that the first time we saw Mr. Skullhead appear? And did you have anything to do that, or was that more Sherry Stoner, or how did Mr. Skullhead come to be?
That was more Sherry. Sherry was would I said okay. Yeah, Sherry was an artist, and she would draw these little freehand characters, and Mr. Skullhead was one of the things she came up with, and I'm sure she just decided it would be a fun thing to pop in there and see. She didn't know it would have a life of its own.
And now, a very special guest on the Elmira Fun Show, it's Mr. Skullhead. It's the Mr. Skullhead Show, starring him, Mr. Skullhead. 'Cause it's his show that he has Mr. Skullhead.
So when it comes into Dracula, there was I think a story that we had heard previously with Paul Rugg. Were both of you basically applying for Animaniacs at the same time?
Yeah, I mean, we were in the same cast, and they assigned us our scripts on the same day and gave us the same deadline. So we went off, and we'd be talking to each other and see how we did, and we turned them in. And he didn't have a car at the time. His wife took it to work, so I drove him in when we dropped off our scripts. And then we rented a bunch of monster movies, and we're watching them. And they called us that afternoon and said, we might be interested in you guys. That was a big deal.
Yes.
Was there ever talk as if one of you got the job and the other one didn't? Was there some competition or, anything like that between the two of you?
No, because neither of us even considered that. We just thought, wow, well, we sold a script. Here's a little Christmas money. And then it ended up, taking off.
Did they give you what was the character sheets like, or things like I know in that episode Wacko's eating everything, and so I'm just wondering how much information they give you about each of the characters before they tell you to write a script for them.
They gave us the show Bible. We put that. Audu Payton found an old copy of it from, I think, fall of '91. That might have been the final show Bible. So we got that, and we got a couple of model sheets of the characters. And they just said, go through the Bible and then cull out whatever you want, because we don't know what works yet. No one did. So they had no idea. So they had a ton of character quirks and aspects and what have you. So we just grabbed what we like and put them in there. My model, I guess the thing I was thinking of at the time was I was thinking of the old Looney Tunes, which were just loaded with action. And so just said, put them in there and we'll have 3 Bugs Bunnies instead of 1, and see what that does to Dracula.
Let me in, you little weasels.
That guy sure dresses funny.
This is Pennsylvania, Wacko. He's probably Amish.
I'll handle him. I saw Witness twice. Greetings, good Amish farmer. How's it going with thee? Is there a place hither where we may sleep, Jan?
Impudent child, you can't make a fool out of me.
Well, you can't blame a guy for trying.
Before we go much further, I think, into our discussion right here with you, John, I think we have to play our lovely game here of This is Your Wikipedia Page. So let's go ahead and go over the intro right here that is stated as fact for all the internet to see of who, sir, you are, who you think you are. Okay, here we go. It says, John P. McCann is an American-born writer, actor, and producer who has mostly focused on writing/producing animation and family-friendly scripts in the past. He is best known for his work on television cartoons, for which he has received numerous awards. But he has also produced live-action screenplays and television scripts. At present, McCann is also working on short stories and a novella. His fiction tends to be either darkly humorous or horror-related. How correct is this, and is there anything we should add out there for, well, not us, but someone should add to the Wikipedia here for your initial description, sir?
Well, that's not too bad. I think my wife wrote that.
An excellent job. That's right.
I have to thank her when she gets home. I think she wrote Ruger's too.
Oh, really? She's written some of, I think, the beginning or ending notes of your books as well, if I'm not mistaken, correct?
Yeah, she was a production manager when we met on magazines, and she has a wealth of skills from proofreading to, managing the content of a book and the layout for it. So she's invaluable. I'd marry her again.
Oh, that's good.
She saves me a fortune. You have to pay for all that stuff otherwise.
Well, Nathan Kelly, I think we should ask John about some of our. There's so many episodes here of Animaniacs that, of course, John was involved in. I'm just going to go over those relatively quickly here. So when it comes to the Warners, John wrote the following Animaniacs episodes: Space Probed, Meatballs or Consequences, Plain Pals, Moby or Not Moby, Dracula, Hot, Bothered, and Bedeviled, Baghdad Cafe, Boot Camping, From Burbank with Love, and Magic Time. When it comes to Slappy Squirrel, there was Hooray for Slappy, and Justice for Slappy, Frontier Slappy, Woodstock Slappy, Scare Happy Slappy, No Face Like Home. And then, of course, we had other selections as well. We had some Rita and Runt cartoons. There was Franken Runt and No Place Like Homeless. There was Which One, which was, if I'm not mistaken, kind of a Beauty and the Beast-ish parody. There also, of course, were some songs as well. You and Me, Panama Canal, The Ballad of Magellan, Here Comes Attila, Mindy and Buttons cartoons, In the Garden of Mindy, and the Mindy 500. And there was even a few bird-based episodes as well. We have Dodo Boys and General Beauregard. And I think that's all of them, but my goodness, there's so many. Nathan Kelly, which one would you like to ask John about here?
The Meatballs or Consequences is one that was on all of our top segments of season one. I definitely within the top 5 of all of ours. So I just wanted to comment that. I don't know what.
Well, what were your recollections right there, or inspirations when it came to an episode like Meatballs or Consequences?
Well, I thought, children just love the Seventh Seal. So I really wanted to capitalize on that.
Yeah.
Originally, it was called Death or Consequences, but for one of the rare times, the studio got a little edgy about that and said it had to be changed. I think Tom changed it to Meatballs. But other than that, I really enjoyed writing that one. It was a lot of fun.
Speaking of the Seventh Seal and things like that, I mean, it goes. The writers have talked about this quite often. When it came to writing episodes of Animaniacs in general, it doesn't seem like there was any regulations on what you could or could not write. What Why do you think that was? It seems like the writers just kind of wrote about what they thought would be funny.
That was pretty much it, because Tom even said at the time that they didn't know how these characters would play out. I mean, you have an idea, you write a show Bible, you have model sheets, you think you know sort of what it's going to be like, but it plays out differently when you start to actually write them and then try and incorporate all this stuff, because new things generally come out. So at the time, there was really nobody to say, what an episode was like. We just based it on whether it was, people liked it, thought it's funny, might work out pretty well. So there really was no sort of set Animaniacs template at that time.
Is that the case to this day, or is it much more restrictive with studios when it comes to television writing?
Yeah, Animaniacs was truly rare. It was sort of like having your dessert first. I think I spent the rest of my career looking for Animaniacs to happen again, or Warner's in the 90s. But no, they're much more regimented, and you have so much more oversight than we did. We had Tom, basically, and then we had Jean McCurdy in charge, and her view was to leave the producers alone. Tom, Alan Burnett, Bruce Timm, whoever was doing Tasmania, just leave them alone, let them do it, as long as they're not, doing anything too crazy, and let them drive, and she would oversee. So I don't think you have that anymore. You have an awful lot of middle management.
I see. Kelly, is there an episode that you'd like to ask John about here?
Well, we also all loved Woodstock Slappy. So what sort of planning or thoughts went into making that? I mean, obviously it was hugely inspired by was it Abbott and Costello and that routine, Who's on First? But I guess where did the idea come from to set it in Woodstock and have that conversation between Slappy and the musicians on stage and everything?
Well, much as I'd like to take credit, I believe it was Tom who came up with. I think he came up with the idea originally for Woodstock Slappy, and then that Who's on First was Tom's. I'll take credit for it. But,
please do. He's not here, so
he was the one who actually came up with that. I believe that Country Joe McDonald, who was at Woodstock, and I think we parodied one of his songs. He called up. He was very irate. He called up Warner Brothers, threatening legal action, I think, at one point. But I think it all, passed over. His contribution to Woodstock was there was something called the Fixin' to Die rag. 1, 2, 3. What are we waiting for? I don't give a darn. Next stop is Vietnam. So that was his, and I think there was some parody of that in there.
Speaking of that, John, did you serve in Vietnam? Were you in the military?
I was in the military toward the end of the war, but I was not in country at that time. I was in the Pacific, but I was not sent down there.
Well, either way, we thank you very much for your service, sir. I mean, it was not to be dismissed, certainly. So thank you for that.
Appreciate that.
Well, not a problem whatsoever. Tom did also say that I believe when it came to that Woodstock Slappy episode, when Tom Ruger was on our show previously, he said that the first pass of the Who's on Stage bit that you gave him, he asked you to, it was way too short, that you needed to have it go longer and longer. Do you have any recollections of that?
No, that could well have been the way it went. But yeah, I don't remember. I remember that pretty much he took that over and brought that one home.
Mm-hmm. As long as we're on the topic of Slappy Squirrel, though, you did write quite a few of some of the best Skippy and Slappy cartoons on Animaniacs. And on the DVD making of for Animaniacs, you did talk a little bit about how Sherry Stoner attributed the character of Slappy Squirrel to you. Can you go into exactly how that character came to be and how, I don't know, your conversations with Sherry influenced that character?
Well, I used to, we used to hang out, and I would kid her. She was acting a lot back in the 80s, and she invariably would end up getting these roles where she was either an ingenue or a young teen or somebody who ends up getting killed by the serial killer. All these movies of the week and things like that. So I used to kid her. I said she'd be 75 years old and she'd still be the ingenue getting killed because she did it so well. And, started playing around with the voices, what do you guys know? And, just had a lot of fun with that. And she'd be, old and wrinkled, but still trying to wear lingerie so a serial killer could get her. We had a blast. But yeah, she was great. And then she made that into Slappy Squirrel.
So John, who are some of your biggest influences when it comes to writing and or comedy in general?
We were, at least for Animaniacs, we were really influenced by the original Warner Brothers, and then the Marx Brothers were just a huge influence on us because we knew we'd be dealing with three characters. Paul Rugg and I loved Monty Python, so we would just love their absurdist sense of humor. We were also both big fans of guys like Jonathan Winters. So we just drew off those guys to and try to bring that sort of spirit into our work.
Blowski here.
I got the most dreamy news. Rod just asked Patty to go steady. Yeah!
This is absurd. You little goons have been bothering me ever since I sat down. Do you know who I am?
No? Do you know who I am?
No.
Then we're even.
All we know is that we like you. We have no taste, but we like you.
And therefore, on behalf of the Warner Brothers
and the Warner sister,
I want to make you our special friend.
What was your favorite and your least favorite episode to work on?
Oh boy. Oh, there were a lot of favorites. I like Meatballs or Consequences. I really liked Spellbound, which was the Pinky and the Brain, the first half hour.
I wonder if that was like kind of almost shot off for their own series kind of thing. Like it showed that they could handle a whole episode on their own. It was almost a pilot.
I think in a way, I think at the time it was just going to be a short, but I think we were in a situation where we needed script ammo for the artists, and Tom said just make it a half hour, and so we expanded it out, and really had a good time doing that. I like the songs too because my cousin used to teach middle school, and since the songs were generally, there was a lot of fact in them, she was able to use them as a teaching aid. And then at the end say, my cousin wrote those.
But did you already like know these things, or did you like have to research those songs? I'm just wondering like how much you knew about like Magellan before you started writing the song for him and stuff like that.
I knew he got killed in the Philippines, but I didn't know the rest. But he really did lose 3 ships. He did keep landing everywhere, but the East Indies. He was out there a long time, and it was a sad payoff for all that effort. But the song was true to its mark.
There once was a man, his name was Magellan, a Portuguese skipper, the girls found him cute. He sailed with 5 ships to find the East Indies, then come back to Spain with a bounty of loot. Whoopie-tie-I-O, oh, happy Brave Magellan, starting your journey with hardly a care. Whoopie-tie-I-O, strong brave Magellan, you'll find the East Indies, you just don't know where.
And then I knew that there was a Panama Canal. I didn't know what the locks were, or how many there were, so I had to research that. And then the UN, actually that song came out of our trip to New York for the Peabody Award. And I think it was Paul and Tom Minton and a few of us went for a tour of the United Nations. And they actually had a pencil holder shaped like a bag. And it said, "I had a bag of fun at the United Nations." I thought, there's got to be more life to that than just to end as a pencil holder. So I ended up incorporating that.
You and me, we had a bag of fun down by the East Riverside. That United Nations there drives away a fella's cares. 183 countries meet down by the East Riverside, New York off 42nd Street.
Well, now we finally know what that bag is all about. Okay. Well, I have to vouch for, yes, using the songs of Animaniacs, such as yours, in the classroom are quite effective. I did quite a bit when I was teaching geography to my own middle school students. In the past, I've done that because, of course, I couldn't say, I know this is my cousin, but this is a show I used to watch when I was a kid. And they would listen and laugh all over again, and it's quite rewarding right there.
Oh, I'm glad to hear it. I'm glad it's still got some legs.
If one thing is true about the show Animaniacs, it absolutely has legs, and the kids are still coming up and when they see stuff on my desk at the school, and they'll say, "Oh, it's Animaniacs," or "That's Pinky and the Brain," and they'll talk to me about different episodes that they've seen and that they remember, and it's just amazing the episodes that you helped write and produce in the show. It must feel fantastic to just know that it continues to live on and entertain people to this day.
It is, because at the time I didn't think of it that much. I thought, this is a really fun show, and they're paying me. And so the idea that it would have a life, or that it would live on, or that it would have an effect, I didn't think of it. But it's just amazing. I am glad to see that people get a kick out of it. It's strange. People I met as fans over the years who were just teenagers at the time, some of them are now married. They have families. I've sort of grown up with them, or grown older with them in any case, because the internet was just beginning then. So in a strange way, we kind of got a fan base right from the get-go that then grew with the technology. So it is, it's a great feeling to know that people enjoy it.
That old squirrel will think I'm just a big woodpecker. I'll chop down this here tree right in front of her.
There's no rest for the elderly. Hey, are you Daniel Boone?
Shoot, no, I'm a big woodpecker.
Get out of here with that woodpecker thing there. You're Boone.
No, I ain't. My daddy was a big woodpecker, and his daddy before him. Can't you see how I'm pecking at your tree for bugs and such?
John, I have a question. Are there any characters you wish that got more screen time?
Absolutely. Toby Danger.
Oh, Toby Danger. Okay, now I remember Toby Danger. Now we're talking about Freakazoid, right?
No, wasn't he was Animaniacs, I think.
Toby Danger? No, I'm going to have to remember.
That was Freakazoid.
Okay, I was like,
I'm having a senior moment.
Well, I agree, though. The Toby Danger, though, let's go into a quick side talk about Freakazoid for a second, because I was just rewatching the first season of Freakazoid with my wife, and the episode with Toby Danger did come up, and this was a parody of Johnny Quest, I believe, correct?
Yeah,
yes,
definitely. Spot on. I mean, Tom Minton and his crew were just astounding in that. They really nailed it. the opening and some of the scenes and that sort of blissful disregard for reality. It was very well done.
I don't get it, Doc. This new security system of yours is still untested.
Yes, but it's all we've got. I predict this hotel will be Dr. Sin's next target.
How in blazes do you know that?
Because every other place is burned to the ground.
I often describe Freakazoid as being ahead of its time. That right there is very much ahead of its time. Like, it was so weird that as a kid, I remember watching Toby Danger and kind of scratching my head as going, this is funny, but I don't quite get it. And now when you watch things like on Adult Swim, the Adult Swim lineup of comedy is based upon, this is so weird, but it's funny. And I think things like Toby Danger really kind of fit into that category of, this is very weird, but it's very, very funny at the same time. So, Toby Danger.
Yeah, I mean, like that Venture Brothers is just basically that whole idea just taken to, expanded about.
You're right. As far as Animaniacs, anyway, I remember early on we had a meeting with Steven Spielberg, and there was a thought that the first breakout characters were going to be the hip hippos. And I mean, that's like saying there's no doubt in my mind that the Cubs will never win the World Series. It was just something that he thought was visually interesting, and that they were these kind of quirky, funny characters with Portuguese accents, and they just vanished into the air. They just never, they never got any traction. So
yeah.
So I always thought that was funny. Don't this is a big giant brain, with a huge number of movies behind him, but he didn't know any more than we did. So.
Well, Kelly, as is our, of course, resident super Steven Spielberg fan. Yeah. I think that's putting it mildly. I'm surprised that Steven Spielberg really was behind the hip hippos that much. That's very interesting.
Maybe he thought his kids would like it. He has a lot of them. It might
have been, but like I said, nobody really knew. We didn't know for whatever. We started in January of '92. I think the first ones aired in September of '93. So we're kind of flying blind for a while. Mm-hmm. No one really knew which ones, or whether the show itself would be any good. So,
what was it like meeting with Spielberg and talking to him about the show? What's he like?
He was very rare. He would come up with ideas, but he never insisted that you put them in there. In other words, he'd throw them out like anybody else in the room, and if it was a good one and we could get it in, we would, and if not, he didn't call up and say, "Where's my idea?" He was great that way, and he would. Here he'd be out. He used to make movies in threes. So when we started, he was in the middle of another three, which was like Hook, Jurassic Park, and Schindler's List. So we'd get faxes from him from Poland, and he'd be "Oh, really love that episode." I mean, he's just amazing. He's just, it would really boost morale. And because the studio wanted to do business with him, they were willing to spend money on animation like comets heading for the Earth. It was just amazing. So he was great, and he kept a lot of people off our backs as far as because if he said he liked it, what's somebody else going to say? So he was great that way. But mostly in those meetings, Tom did most of the talking, or Gene McCurdy, and we just sat there and smiled and nodded and try not to embarrass ourselves. I'll tell you one more Steven Spielberg thing. He, his offices were over on Universal, and they used to call his suite of offices Taco Bell because it was done up in a Southwestern style.
Mm-hmm.
But they would pack people into meeting rooms, and they were these meeting rooms with thick furniture, and they would have coffee bars set out and danishes and everything else like that. And then they would take Steven Spielberg and they would bring him in from room to room. It was like creative Jiffy Lube. He'd go into one and he'd talk marketing for some movie, and he'd go into another one and he'd talk pre-production for another film. Then he'd come in and he'd talk to us. And then he'd go down the hall and he'd talk to a couple of writers. It was just amazing. They'd run him around and maximize his time.
Oh, wow. That's so interesting.
Yeah, it's not funny, but it's interesting.
It's something I did not know, so there you go.
Well, it's probably still to this day very much run that way. He's just such a busy guy. Do you have a favorite character or set of characters working on the show?
I really liked Pinky and the Brain, actually, and I liked Slappy too, mostly because it was Sherry doing that, and I tried to think of interesting things to make her say.
Yeah, those were the Slappy ones, especially, were just some of my favorite Slappy cartoons are the ones that you wrote. Whether it was you or Sherry writing for Slappy, it seems like those are always some of the better ones out there.
Yeah, like you understood her better. And you were actually a voice in Justice for Slappy, right?
Yes, yeah. I think that was the first voice I did on Animaniacs.
Nice.
Were there any other characters that you voiced on Animaniacs?
I don't believe so. I think that was it, and I was so glad to just be writing. I didn't think I had. I remember when they told us we would get royalties for songs, because we didn't get royalties for the writing. It was just work for hire. But they said you'd get BMI or ASCAP royalties if you write a song. And boy, everything I did turned into a light opera once I heard that. They told me to cool it a little bit, but I thought, wow, what a great deal. Mailbox money.
Yeah, exactly. There is a question here from one of our listeners here that it actually talks about not Animaniacs, not Freakazoid either, but Malik here has a question about the Sylvester and Tweety mysteries. He wanted to know, because of course we can say it's related because of course the Sylvester and Tweety mysteries were on Kids WB and within that block of Animaniacs, Freakazoid, Pinky and the Brain, etc. But he says the first season was comprised of 13 22-minute episodes, and I found that really interesting when I first saw the show a couple of years back. And he said that's that the episode "A Chip Off the Old Castle" is one of his favorites, and Mr. McCann wrote that himself. He basically just wants to know, what was the writing process like on Sylvester and Tweety Mysteries? Was that, I guess, similar to Animaniacs and Freakazoid, or was that kind of a different setup?
No, it was pretty similar. Tom Minton was running the show. I think the Cahills were story editing it, and they were fine. They'd and the fact that it was a classic cartoon character, I really enjoyed that. Any opportunity I had to write for those, I thought was a real blessing to be part of that. Mm-hmm. Part of that legacy. But yeah, it was fine. I just I don't know why I only got one of those, but yeah, it just happened. I'm glad I had the opportunity. I got a couple. I did a few Sylvester and Tweety mysteries, but yeah, they were fine. They were, nothing painful about Animaniacs or working over there compared to what I had later on. So
yes. Well, let's talk briefly about Freakazoid. We already talked a little bit about it, but You had quite a big hand in the production of Freakazoid and writing some of those episodes. What are some of your memories about working on Freakazoid? Of course, it was too short-lived, only 2 seasons. But what can you tell us about what it was like to work on that show?
Yeah, it just the voice recording sessions were just some of the fun times I ever had. We'd get all those people in there. We'd get Ricardo Montalban and Ed Asner and everyone in there, and we'd get the whole cast in at once. We wouldn't do it a la carte. We'd get them all sitting in there so they could sort of play off each other. But it was just so much fun doing that. And then the editing sessions, Al Breitenbacher was our editor. He doesn't get enough credit. He had a real eye for where the laugh was, and he was a good musician too. He did the Animaniacs suite, the last Animaniacs bit, where they did a bunch of episodes put together with all the music from there. It was a couple of minutes long, but it was really a great tribute to the show. But yeah, he was a fantastic guy to work with, and those were always a lot of fun.
Mm-hmm. And of course, you got to voice Freakazoid's, Dexter Douglas's dad, Douglas.
Here we have a splendid example of hominid near man.
Oh, by golly, can you imagine not walking upright? All hunched over like a little bunny? Honey, I'm frightened.
Relax, Peach Face. People like that don't exist anymore. If they did, the government would make them wear special pants.
Yeah, and Hero Boy.
And Hero Boy? Wait, so you were the one that was you got to voice Hero Boy going all that stuff?
Yeah, that was
wow.
You know, they said play to your strengths. So
that's quite impressive. I would not have pegged you for Hero Boy. That is. Well, we know what we need to do now. Fun. If we need John to be on the show again, we'll just shout out Hero Boy, and then he'll come flying.
Yeah, I must succeed.
There he is. There we are.
I did the song. I did the song for that too. The Hero Boy song.
Hero Boy! Hero Boy! Hero Boy! That is I! I must succeed!
I must succeed!
It's just such a crazy show. I mean, when it came to things like, obviously that was influenced by Astro Boy, I believe was the character's name.
Right.
When it came to references to shows like that from the 50s, from the 60s, and so on, or even before that, I know when it comes to me, I have Animaniacs, part of me like introduces kids to that because I say, this was something I liked when I was a kid and maybe you'll like it too. Was there ever a sense in writing when you were putting in references to, I don't know, the Marx Brothers or Astro Boy or things like that you kind of wanted kids to check those things out? Is that one of the things do you think the writers used to do or intentionally, or was that just kind of an unconscious thing?
I think it just happened. You know, you reach for whatever you remember, in something to draw on, something to inspire you, something to model some of the action off after. And we were mostly focused just on the episode at hand, trying to get that as good as we could and out the door. So, but yeah, I guess in time, it does, you do become, you do leave it, or at least, you can spark interest in characters and shows going by, just by the references.
Well, it definitely worked for me. I mean, I don't think I would have seen as many Marx Brothers films, in the following years if it weren't for things like Animaniacs showing me that. I mean, we had a brief discussion with Maurice LaMarche about Orson Welles and how, my dad walked into the room while we were watching Animaniacs and started laughing hysterically. And I said, "What?" And he says, "That's Orson Welles. It's Orson Welles." And I said, "Who's Orson Welles?" So it turned into a whole discussion of War of the Worlds from there and everything like that. So you never know how it's going to just kind of trigger an interest in additional things. So that's fantastic. All right. Well, let's go ahead, before we wrap things up, let's go ahead and talk about, John, what you have been working on more recently. And Kelly, what question do we have from one of our listeners?
Okay, Sal on Twitter wants to know, have you worked on anything recently? They thought they saw your name on a Tom and Jerry recently, but they could be wrong.
Oh, no, that wasn't me.
There's a different John McCann.
There is another John McCann. He's an actor based out of New York. And I used to get his phone calls. And I actually tried to take his jobs once in a while. But they sort of knew better. I'd get calls from, Bell Telephone in New York. Are you going to be in town pretty soon? Well, what? How much are we talking here?
And I think I looked you up on. I think I typed in John P. McCann on YouTube, and there's some weird survivalist man who's written some books as well. That I thought, oh my gosh, what happened to John? He has this long beard, and he doesn't look the same at all. And then I realized, oh, it's this weird survivalist man. So.
You thought I went full-on Randy Quaid.
Yes, I did. I was very concerned for a moment. After Freakazoid and Animaniacs, what other shows did you work on?
I did these web episodes of the classic characters for Warner Brothers' fledgling website, and I did another one for a show called Lobo that we tried to launch as a animated series, but ended up putting on the web. Didn't really, just kind of bounced around. I did Ozzy and Drix and Jimmy Neutron, and I did some series over in Germany. It was for European cable. They do them in English over there. But there were 24 episodes. I story edited those. I don't know whatever became of them, but what else? A bunch of different things. Tom had that series with PBS called Animalia.
Oh yes.
So he did a number. Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, and I think you did a little bit with Tom with 7D, if I'm not mistaken, right? Did you write one or two episodes of that?
Yeah, I did two of those, and Kung Fu Panda, and a few more. Some non-union stuff that kept the bill collectors away briefly. But I haven't done anything recently because I took official retirement from TV animation just because I needed the medical benefits.
I think that goes into an interesting segue we could make into your more recent writings. You've written quite a few books that are available online at Amazon that you can download straight to your Kindle, many of which, by the way, ladies and gentlemen, are incredibly affordable. One of the latest ones you've written, Jury Duty, spelled Doody, by the way, Jury Duty, is available for just 99 cents. So there's no reason not to, pick up one of John's writings. Now, you use the pen name JP Mac. Is there a specific reason why you've moved to the JP Mac as your author name?
Yes, it fit better on a thumbnail online. So short and punchy, and didn't take up too much room.
I see. I was just curious about that. But it works. It works. Your most recent ebook is called They Took My Prostate. I just finished reading it a week or so ago, and it's about your journey through your diagnosis, your treatment, and your recovery of prostate cancer. And it's a brutally honest book, I think is what I put down in my Amazon review, is that it is a brutally honest but incredibly funny book. And it really felt like, as I was reading this book, like I was going through this journey with you, whether it was going through, just the diagnosis portion and the shock and everything like that, but also the stress at the time of not having the money to pay for some of these bills that were going to happen. So could you just tell us a little bit about that? I mean, why did you write the book?
Well, I kept notes at the time that I was going through all this, and I didn't think they'd amount to anything. But then I began encountering more guys who had been diagnosed and who had to have surgery or, the radiation treatment or something. And basically, I mean, if you're a guy, this could be in your future. So because so many things sort of went sideways with my treatment and my condition, I thought if I wrote this book and you only had a fraction of what I went through, then you might not feel so bad about things. And also you'd know that in the end, there's hope.
Absolutely. And you do it in such a way that it's such a humorous read as well. And looking at the reviews from other people who have been diagnosed with either prostate cancer, or I think I even saw some reviews of just cancer in general. They really did find the book as a hopeful book as well. I think through that humor that you have, which can be a little dark from time to time in it, but still at the same time, it brought I guess you could say it didn't seem as bleak throughout it all. Just somehow it seemed optimistic, I guess.
Right. If a guy gets diagnosed and he has to go through what I did, and just from my straw poll of people I've known through that, I'll tell you, if you want to know something about a disease, catch it, because you'll end up learning more than you ever thought you'd know. But people go through it, and they're each guy seems to respond differently to it. And I was just hoping, because it is a depressing time and it is awful, and it does really strike at your dignity, and just being a guy, and just letting men know that there's a way out, and there is a possibility of hope and of a decent life afterwards.
Absolutely. I have one highlighted section of the book that I quite enjoyed, just speaking of strange humor that really stood out. There's a section right here that says, "Are there drawbacks? I read about one in the Weekly World News. Several years ago in Tokyo, 4 robot prostatectomy devices activated on their own. Late at night, they crept from the hospital and assaulted men in the Ginza, removing their prostates regardless of condition, need, or ability to pay. Afterwards, the devices returned quietly to the hospital before dawn. No one knows why." What are you going to do? It's Japan. They marry their sex robots. So anyway, it's just moments like that just made me laugh out loud. Speaking just from my own experience as a male, thinking that, prostate cancer might be something that I might have to face as well down the road. Both my grandfather and great-grandfather had prostate cancer. So it's definitely one of those things that, as I read the book, I kind of kept in the back of my head that, hey, if John's going through this, and, especially if he's being told, oh, it'll be a simple procedure, and then there's complications along the way, that it can still turn out okay, especially with the support, as you were saying, from like your wife and things like that really that helped you along.
Yeah, just to let you know, you are at risk if it runs in your family. And then African American men catch it just, at a much greater rate for whatever reason. So there are things that can make it more prevalent, but yes, there is a way out, and some people just they can just be monitored over time, and mine just ended up being aggressive, and if they waited too long, I might lose the opportunity to be able to catch it all up front. So I had to move. But I've met guys who've gone through the exact same thing. They've been home in 2 days and back to work the next week. So, guys, you take it differently, but it is something to bear in mind as you get older.
Absolutely. Well, you hear that, Nathan? Nathan's my brother, so
yeah,
keep that in mind. Well, let's go ahead and, John, before we wrap things up, we have some other books as well. What would you like to highlight any of those, or tell us about what other writings you have available?
Oh, if anyone is, has a yen for Lovecraftian horror and comedy, two things that rarely go together, but I've tried to combine them in Hollow Mass, which is a novel, a story of set. It's sort of a continuation of the old Lovecraft tale of the Dunwich Horror, and it's an updating of it for the 21st century. What happens 100 years later? So it's got magic and monsters and laughs and characters drinking cocktails. So something in there for all.
Fantastic. And Lovecraft, that must have been one of your influences, because I believe there's a very Lovecraftian monster in Freakazoid as well, I think in the second season, if I'm not mistaken. I don't know if that had anything to do. I just saw that. It's like, okay, a Cthulhu's in Freakazoid all of a sudden. This is interesting.
Right. He sort of Surfer Cthulhu.
And of course, you have your blog as well, rightenough.blogspot.com, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes. I was just thinking today I should have gone back through there and culled out all the articles I have on, working on Animaniacs or working in animation. They're spread out over 12 years worth of posts. But if I get around to it, I should pull them all up and link them, and I can give you guys a call if you want to let people know.
Absolutely.
And they can, if there's something I forgot here, I might have written it down there. So
absolutely. And then we'll either, we can talk about it either here on the air, or just, through retweets or Facebooks and stuff like that, because you have you're quite active on your blog. So it is something that people should definitely check out and see what's going on in your own life and things like that.
So, John, I don't know if you've heard, but apparently Animaniacs is getting a reboot or revival. Do you have any thoughts on that? I don't believe you've been asked yet, right, to return. Is that correct?
That's correct, yeah. I would be surprised if anybody is who worked on it. I think it helps to think of it as old Animaniacs, what we're talking about, and new Animaniacs, which remains to be seen what that'll be. But I think a lot of people think it's going to be like a tribute band where, it's if you like Nirvana and they're bringing the band back and they're saying, well, we're going to have more Nirvana, and you go to see them and they have a tuba section and a didgeridoo and a guy blowing air into a jug. And you say, well, it's called Nirvana, but it sure sounds different. That's probably what you're going to get.
Yeah, the song titles are the same, just it's a different version of Lithium.
Right. They can't make it the way it was. Because they're not going to spend that kind of money. They just aren't. They're not going to hire a 40-piece orchestra. They just aren't. And the fact is that you have a lot of overhead now. You're going to have Netflix, Warner Brothers, and DreamWorks, wanting to have a say in what's put out there. So it's and then I think, didn't they hire the guy, somebody from Family Guy to...
Yes, Leslie Wild. Yes, Leslie Wild is his name.
Right, so it would stand to reason that he would hire Family Guy writers to do that. So I think if you like Family Guy, you're probably going to like the new reboot, because I think their goal will be to find a new audience in the 21st century, people who maybe know of but aren't all that familiar with the old Animaniacs, but like the new take of the new one. And then maybe the Family Guy fans will come over because they like the sensibility. So I think it'll be something other. It'll be something a little different than what we've seen. But we'll always have Paris.
Yeah, exactly. They can't take away the originals, so it's like,
right. Exactly.
Yeah.
That is. So whatever the new one is, I would be cautiously optimistic.
All right. And coming up in a couple weeks, there's going to be the Freakacon that's going to be coming out. Are you going to be involved in any way? Or are you going to be just kind of watching from afar as the rest of us are?
Yeah, I may be with you guys. Paul said he might come over and shoot some stuff, and they would insert it in there. But it's mostly Paul and Tom who are running with that. So it should be a lot of fun. Should be great.
All right. And, of course, the Freakacon right there is March 15th, and that's on Facebook. And people can find out about that on facebook.com/Freakacon, I think is the website for that.
Yeah. Oh, John, are you going to submit a fanboy video to Tom?
I think I might tip my hand somehow.
Yeah, well, I think that would be pretty fun. You could win.
Hard to sneak my stuff by him, but you're right. It could work.
Well, John, thank you so much for being on the show once again. It's been an honor having you on. Again, I know this has been quite a thrill from many of our audience members as well, who like listening in and have so many fond memories of the episodes that you've written over the years. And again, just thank you so much for being on the show. It was quite an honor.
Well, I'm delighted, and I'm glad you guys are doing what you do and keeping the memory alive. I think that's great. Gives me a good feeling.
Oh,
thank you so much. And our audience, once again, you can find John's writings on Amazon under JP Mac, and check out his blog, writeenough.blogspot.com. And with that, John, thank you so much for being on the Animanicast, and we will talk to you. We'll talk to you later.
You bet you will. Good luck, guys.
Well, let's go ahead and get over to our contact information. Kelly, where can people get in contact with you?
They can find me on Twitter at YodaPrincess, YODAPRNCSS, or email me, Kelly@BigShinyRobot.com.
And Nathan, what about you?
I'm in LA, folks, if you're in the area. But if you're not, you can try finding me on Twitter. JangoFT, that's me.
All right, and as for the Animanicast, we are on Twitter, we are on Facebook, we are on Instagram, and you can always email us at animanicast@retrozap.com. Hey, wait a minute. Speaking of retrozap.com, you should head on over there. You know why? Because every day there's something going on over there. It is insane. There's tons of fantastic articles to read, and there's also fantastic podcasts that you should be listening to as well, such as the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. podcast, ArgCast, Beltway Banthas, Brews and Blasters, Classic Marvel Star Wars Comics, The Deucecast Movie Show, Dork Lair, Dunecast, Green Justice and Arrow podcast, Kanata's Castle, The Sandcrawler podcast, Scarlet Velocity, a Flash podcast, Skywalking Through Neverland, Starships, Sabers, and Scoundrels, Talking Apes TV, Techno Retro Dads, Terrigan Dreams, the Trade Federation, Warp Trails, and We Know Nothing. My goodness, the podcast network at RetroZap is huge right now, so lots of different franchises for you to check it out. And in fact, one of the easiest ways to listen to every one of those podcasts is to simply go onto Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to your podcasts and simply subscribe to the Retro Zap feed. You can get every single one of those podcasts delivered straight to your device, and you can listen at your leisure. It's fantastic. By the way, you can also go to Animanicast.com and see a full listing of our previous shows, as well as subscribing to us on whatever podcasting you have, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Google Play, whatever. And so, for Nathan and Kelly, this is Joey saying, good night, everybody.
Good night, everybody.
Good night, everybody.
This podcast is not endorsed by Warner Brothers or Amblin Entertainment and is intended for entertainment and information purposes only. Animaniacs, the Warner Brothers logo, all names, pictures, and sounds of the Animaniacs characters or any other Animaniacs-related items are registered trademarks and or copyrights of Warner Brothers, Amblin Entertainment, or their respective trademark and copyright holders. All original content of this podcast is the intellectual property of the Animanicast unless otherwise indicated.
According to legend, General Grievous was known to boast of the number of lightsabers he had acquired from the bodies of his slain Jedi enemies. Grievous was the first in a long tradition of collectors of rare items, a tradition that continues to this day on the Retro Zap podcast known as the Dork Lair.
Dork Lair.
Banded together across the television dial are the 4 greatest superhero podcasts on the internet. Green Justice and Arrow podcast, Scarlet Velocity, a Flash podcast, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Case Files, and Terrigen Dreams, an Inhumans podcast. Join Super Friends Jovial J and Jedi Schwa weekly as they provide commentary and discussion on your favorite heroes. Only on RetroZap.com.